Hi, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this Wheaton conversation with Brett Swenson. I'm Pamela Weichman, your host and the Director of Education and Artist Services at WheatonArts. I'm a white female in my mid-30s with long brown hair and blue eyes. Tonight, I am wearing a gray sweater. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm broadcasting from Southern New Jersey, which I recognize as traditionally the land of the Lenni Lenape. Wheaton Conversations is presented by PNC Arts Alive, the United Nations International Year of Glass, and the Art Alliance for Contemporary Glass. We thank them for their support. Through membership, donations, and shopping at shop.wheatonarts.org, you too can show your support. Please consider exploring these options so we can continue to offer free programs such as these. It is my pleasure to introduce my co-host for this program and the moderator, Alex Rosenberg. Alex is a Philadelphia-based artist, educator, and writer. He is currently the director of the Glass Studio here at WheatonArts. Alex, thank you for joining us and for leading our conversation.
Thanks, Pam, and thanks for all of you tuning in. I'm really pleased to have Brett Swenson talking to us tonight about his practice. I've admired Brett's work for kind of a long time now. I think I became aware of his work while he was a student during his undergraduate at Rhode Island School of Design, and we were just kind of remembering. I was fortunate to curate him into a large international group show in Seattle in, I think, 2010. Anyway, I think he went on to get a MFA from University of Chicago, and he's a faculty member now at University of Wisconsin. Brett was also part of the Creative Glass Fellowship Program. He was a fellow here in 2011. So I think personally, I have a lot of interest, and we've got a chance to talk about this before the presentation about some of the overlap of our artistic practices, and I think also like our professional trajectory. So I know I'll have a lot of kind of specific questions to ask him. But now I'm going to go ahead and introduce Brett, and he's going to tell you about what he does.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, it's cool to be talking to you guys and just reminiscing about not just like undergrad days, but yeah, the Wheaton residency. When I think about that, it was a pretty formative time, and remains, I think, one of the best glass-centric artist residencies in terms of just what feels possible. Meaning I don't remember anything that ever came up that felt like I couldn't do it, which is special. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. So I'm going to start off by talking about work that has come from grad school onwards. So I finished up at University of Chicago in 2020, and since then, and a little bit before then, had kind of left glass behind, actually, in terms of just the place my studio practice was at. But it's been really nice to revisit it and think through it again, especially just having what I feel like is a new perspective for it. And one of the things that's really special about glass and in an academic space where you're learning with glass is there's just so much collaboration going on. And I feel like I was lucky to start teaching here at UW-Madison, where I am right now, right after the worst of the pandemic. And so just getting people back in physical space with each other, having to negotiate shared terms in that physical space, watching students develop in that context has just been really rewarding. And it's that same, it's collaboration specifically that I think was one of the main things that allowed me to transform my practice, as it were, to be able to really start exploring new ideas, new material, to be able to crash my car, as one of my teachers in grad school would say. You know, sometimes you really have to mess yourself up in order to find new ground. And so there's no better way to do that than to have to contend with someone else's sensibility in a collaborative context. So I'm going to start here with what is a collaboration that I have with my partner Kai Eanes. We make videos together under the name Dunt Project. And this film we made together in 2020 called Sleep Noises was part of the main kind of part of my thesis exhibition. And so a lot of what I was looking at, what we were looking at, but even before I started working with Kai, you know, my work before this was really dependent a lot on kind of exotic phenomena, glass being one of them. And so I kind of have taken a hard turn towards thinking about more ordinary subject matter. And so our medium in this case was both of our kind of environments. We used our family members in a lot of the images you'll see in this film. I'm going to show you just a quick section here to give you a sense for what it's about. It's abstract, by the way. It's not a narrative piece. All right, so that's just a taste of that. That's a 30-minute film in total, where we're really just kind of exploring this suburban environment where we kind of were holed up during the pandemic. And and just kind of every day going out filming just whatever we saw, asking people to do things and seeing how they would respond. Very organic process, highly inefficient, but exciting, the kind of stuff that we produced together, and both in the accumulation of the footage and in the editing was really us contending, Kai and I, as collaborators with two very different sensibilities, but something we're both proud of as, you know, it's not something either one of us could have made on our own, which is exciting. So this is a image of the piece installed. There's a sculpture that is connected to the film, a 3D print object called Wedge. I should emphasize that I think at this point, a lot of my work is really interested in forms of abstraction. And so this came out of encountering, for whatever reason, the building we are in is this glass tower, and unfortunately birds would frequently fly into the glass. And so it wasn't unusual that I would kind of be stopped in my walking down the hallway by seeing this, you know, some bird I'd never seen before, just dead on the pavement. So then I started scanning them with this very rudimentary 3D scanner, which produced really funny artifacts around, like the bird only became a kind of seed for the object to grow around. And I really liked that the scanner was kind of capturing an active looking and making that available as a form. But the whole thing was installed as this funny kind of, I don't know, an image of a domestic space, perhaps, a kind of tightly tucked away, quiet, and perhaps aggressively neutral, thinking about neutrality as something active and kind of the very antithesis of what it sounds like. So yeah, this is really all to kind of lay the groundwork for the kind of the sensibility that I'm bringing into the glass studio now, which, like I said, is much different than where I was back, you know, when I was working with glass, say, 10 years ago. More of the wedges. So from here, I had upholstered this bench I made with sound dampening fabric, the stuff that had been, my dad used to run his business out of our house growing up, and the cubicles were lined with this sound dampening fabric. And I was really just anything at this point that was gray, I was like very excited about. So I started upholstering more than just this bench with this terrible stuff. This big log had just been sitting at the end of my parents' driveway, and so I was like, oh, what if I upholstered a log? So that was kind of interesting to me, and correlates back to a lot of the work I've done over the years, just thinking about the way surfaces and interiors can kind of modify each other or affect, kind of, you know, transform each other in this back and forth kind of way that's hard to reconcile. Playing with other materials like some gold seatbelt you might see in a Buick or something. And then I started taking, you know, interested in textures, obviously here too, always have been. I started taking castings off of the cut end of logs and getting really deep into epoxy, just different kinds of epoxies as mediums to explore. In this case, instead of upholstering the log, I just kind of made this almost like the pie crust around it, and thinking about, yeah, interiors and really just, yeah, pushing these really basic materials that are, kind of borrowing from construction a little bit. But thinking about just the most like kind of base stuff I could get my hands on. Turns out liquid nail is kind of fun to work. These I actually really came to like a lot out of this line of inquiry. So this is the silicone molds I had made off the caps of a cut log. But when I filled them with epoxy, they were so thin that the silicone would stretch and fill with the epoxy to make these bulbous shapes that were really unexpected, but kind of pleasing to me in the way that they actually, I would take them out of the molds before the epoxy had fully cured, and so they would sag a little bit. I would kind of just stick it on the wall while it was still slowly moving. Maybe this is the, the glass person in me. And these really subtle, but I think impactful kind of folds that would start to occur really kind of felt like skin or something. But I felt, quite attracted to this more subtle approach to translating these forms from nature as they were into something that's still kind of natural, but and then this color too, this butter color that I've been using a lot, that became its own kind of subject matter for me that I've been playing with a lot. And like a lot of the things I'm doing now too are like, if I the little bit of humor I think is really really nice, especially these days. I think if I don't find something at least a little bit funny somewhere now, that's just something I'm really much more attuned to, some levity in art making, and yeah, just having fun with it. In this case, this piece was a little bit of an accident, but I don't know what I was trying to do, but I was playing with plaster and wasp nests, and this just kind of came out in a way that was a little morbid maybe, but I quite like it. Found objects. This is also something I'm increasingly interested in experimenting with, and just playing with like the context that objects bring to a sculptural object, and yeah, taking on more of the kind of like quote unquote everyday. This is another from the same, so this is 2022, yeah, 2022, our most recent film as done project. It's called The Giant Bull. This is available on our Vimeo channel, as well as Sleep Noises in its entirety. So you can check those out there. But this is coming after Sleep Noises, where we just kind of locked ourselves up in this particular environment with these particular people and just dealt with that. That was the parameters. This film was made in Kai's childhood home in Atlanta, and Kai was brave enough to be the kind of subject matter in this one. And yeah, just kind of setting up a situation where you give yourself, we gave ourselves 2 weeks basically to film in this house. Some things that happened were expected, a lot of things that happened. Ultimately, the whole piece ended up being something that neither one of us could have planned, but I think is quite an interesting interrogation of the kind of ways we view ourselves and the harsh reality of how others see ourselves, and the kind of dissonance that can exist there, and this kind of just domesticity as a ongoing place of artistic exploration. Okay, so that brings us to in what was it, 2 years ago now, Helen Lee and Andrew Bernot together got me to come up to Madison. Like I said, I was a little reluctant at first because I was just sort of like, oh no, glasses, like I'm done with that. But I brought my logs and we started experimenting, and sure enough, I was kind of like, okay, this is fun. And so, yeah, we kind of went just crazy for a day, doing all sorts of different things with by very simple means, just basically different variations of glass and logs. I actually quite like these just as images in their own right. There's something quite interesting to me about the kind of bisecting and the way that cutting and burning are kind of working together to create a kind of surprising both a form and an image. But yeah, we did pretty much anything we could think of to create forms and textures with logs. And yeah, I kind of got excited enough to be like, yeah, let's see what we can do in a teaching context to kind of again, I feel I view teaching as a kind of collaboration. I bring a lot of stuff to the table that I am interested in seeing happen, but I also try to really let the students follow their own threads and respond to each other more than anything. I think setting up the situation where students can feel free to really try their wildest ideas, and then you know, someone sees someone do something, they're like, oh, whoa, you can do that, and then like suddenly everybody's kind of like in this cool mix of experimentation. So yeah, things can get a little messy though in doing things that way, but what else are hot shops for? So this stuff is cool. I really love the kind of textures and forms that came out of that whole set of experiments, especially stuff like this that was on the thinner kind of wafery side. But I still was like, oh man, this glass, like the glass felt so heavy to me, and it felt kind of like serious. So again, like color became a way to really shake things up, and for me especially with like, if anybody has seen like my work from like any time before 2018, not a lot of color. I was not interested in color so much, but now I just feel like give me the wildest, ugliest colors in the inventory, and that's what we're doing. And also just kind of, you know, glass, embracing the kind of functional potential of glass, but playing a little bit with the what you might, you know, usually see in a domestic light fixture. These Osage oranges just happen to grow in the park where we live. And then one day I just kind of got this idea to maybe play with baskets as a blow mold. A lot of the stuff we do here is around mold blowing, and quick and dirty blow molds is always a lot of fun. So I started playing around with directly blowing into baskets. Some nice textures there. Playing off of existing light fixtures, just having fun with that. At some point, was it middle of last semester, we went to the Art Preserve, which is a new museum that Kohler in Wisconsin has recently built to house this, for lack of a better word, outsider artist collection. So we took the glass lab there for a field trip. We saw the factory, but we also went to the art preserve, and I at least found that quite interesting. And you know, a lot of the artists in this come from, you know, the Midwest or like the rural South, or I think as far as like rural India. Just a bunch of weirdos doing their thing in you know, on their own terms. And yeah, so that was kind of in my head, and like thinking about the ordinary, and thinking about accumulation, just kind of like, wow, like this person felt compelled to make whatever, 200 of these angels. That was what they had to do. So I started every time I came up to Madison, once a week, I drive up here and I would stop at the Wisconsin thrift stores are the best thrift stores. So I would stop at thrift stores every week and pick up a carload of baskets. And I started thinking about those as the skin, or like the I guess I liked the way baskets hold this kind of question of expectation and desire. And I'm also interested in, like, where do baskets go? They go to the thrift store. Like where else do like, they're not quite, people don't really want to throw them away, but like nobody really wants them. And then, I'd show up at the checkout and be like, oh, you sure like baskets? No, no one else is buying these. But yeah, there's something about that. I think maybe being back in the Midwest, lived on the East Coast for 10 years. So being back in the Midwest has been kind of interesting to think about, just the things that point to certain cultural values that maybe are forgotten about, or hard to articulate now, but still kind of, for lack of a better phrase, like, is there something in the water for me when I'm collecting these baskets? So started dedicating many a blow slot to making baskets. Um, so the nice thing about those is everyone is a one-off. The basket burns away. And what you're left with is this kind of, I guess, like Rachel White Reed-esque negative turned positive, but it's still a vessel. It still stands to hold something, but is a kind of form that's wavering perhaps between inside and outside, abstract and legible, all of which is really interesting to me. And yeah, at this point, so on the bottom right, this is like the first. I would make them in 5 at a time or so. And this one is one of the early ones. And at this point, I had sent this picture to Kai, and then Kai had been in the process of writing a chapbook called Green Sky, and she took this image and then created this nice graph, kind of charting, or a chart rather, charting out the kind of trajectory of, going back to that log all the way through to these baskets that you see now. And yeah, this kind of mind map thing that was layered also, for her, was really relevant to what she was thinking about in terms of coming in and out of form, basic ideas of abstraction, and in her case with language. She's a poet, as well as a filmmaker. And yeah, so it's just been another great example of kind of spontaneous collaborative moment. I helped her a little bit with the design of the cover, and some of these, there's a few images of these pieces in the chapbook. It's just a really nice way to, and then like in her doing that, it like further clarifies what I'm trying to do with my thing here. There's no better way to kind of help you see yourself than through another person. Green Sky is available at Slug Press. Just a quick plug, recommend it. So yeah, I tried to really expand the color palette. I would be on Reichenbach and like, find the kind of colors that made me think of like my grandmother, or I don't know, just any color that I was like, who would want that color? That's the color that I would want. And this is a show over the summer that these were in at a gallery called Space and Time in Chicago. Better sense of just like the full kind of scale of the color palette. Yeah, just like this is not something I thought I would be doing now, but it's like really fun and exciting to see, being able to come back into glass, at least for now, with a kind of different set of eyes. These baskets are for sale. If anyone's interested, feel free to reach out to me. I may do some sort of like Instagram shop, but for now. Right now, I'm thinking about, I've made about as many baskets as I can, frankly. So at some point, you get, the initial kind of like wow of like, oh, maybe this is a thing that I need to pursue, and then you fill that out, and then at some point you're like, okay, or for me at least, I'm just like I feel myself kind of repeating the same tricks. So, but I remain really interested. Every time I would soak these baskets in the water before blowing into them, they would create these great colors, almost like teas, basket tea. And it smells really kind of like sour and acrid or something. We're not sure exactly why these colors happen, but I'm thinking about something sculptural that just plays off of that a little bit more directly. So TBD. Yeah, that's all I got.
Thanks so much, Brett. That was awesome to see. We actually have one question already in the chat, which is about the butter color. Can you talk about the origins of butter color as in the like that kind of wonderful epoxy work that you were showing earlier?
Yeah. I think, it has something to do, I don't know, I don't know. It's one of these things that maybe the more I talk about it, the less interesting it is, but I'll try. I think there's something, it's like fatty. It's butter, like everyone likes butter. It has like there's something like filling about it. I think it has something to do with that. And, similar to the baskets, it's just this thing that's everywhere, but to me, it kind of represents like like bounty or something um it's just fat, like in terms of like a metabolic currency, fat is valuable, but it's yeah, so I don't know. I don't know exactly why, but I just started using it, and then it's something that everybody can see, and immediately associate something with. I was looking at like Twinkies and other things that are kind of just these. It's not necessarily healthy, but it's like, yeah, if money stopped working, maybe butter would be a form of exchange. I don't know.
I forgot to mention, this is for those of you participants, if you want to put questions into the Q&A, we'll answer, or we'll ask as many of them as we can with the time remaining. I think we have another one from Pam that says, you said you've made your share of baskets. Are you moving on from them? What's next?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm gonna try to play with like the baskets in the water specifically, and like, aside from the glass, those I've been looking at kiddie pools. But yeah, I'm also working on a film right now, probably short film. We made, Kai and I made 3 films together. So and she went out and learned film proper and has been making short films, which has been very cool. And I was like, oh, I need to circle back and maybe try to make one on my own again and see what that looks like. Because it's kind of crazy to see how much your own sensibility gets like messed up by someone else's, and then it's like now that's your sensibility, which is, yeah, it's cool. So yeah, and then we would also like to, we're thinking about what our next collaborative film might be or where it might be.
I have a couple things that things that kind of popped up. I think I was seeing throughout the talk this kind of distinction between like the exotic and the ordinary. You know, like you kind of started with this idea about exotic phenomena and this kind of shift to ordinary phenomena. And I guess like I wonder a little bit about like where you see that line, and like, you know, for example, that first little film that you showed,
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes, you know, to me in a way that almost looks like making the ordinary exotic, or like looking through this kind of like strange
Yeah.
lens. Yeah, kind of like, you know, queering like the ordinary or
Yeah.
something like that. And I wonder if you can kind of talk about that a little bit, and like how working with like exotic material kind of like influences handling ordinary material, or where you know where that edge is.
Yeah, I feel like, yeah, on some level I can't help but do that. It seems so. What was happening before, and I made some pieces I still think hold up, but like this, I was obsessed with this volcanic glass for a long time, and um, the things that I think worked well was when I was bringing in recognizable other things, like a laboratory flask or a pylon or something that was like in the world, as it were, in the world for everybody, like not something that's from outer space. The obsidian itself was like novel, you know, like it's fascinating, but it's novel. And so to take something novel and to make it novel is kind of like a bit redundant. There's no end, I feel, to the possibilities of, yeah, retuning ourselves to what's already around us, and art is, to my sense, one of the best ways to do that. And so yeah, if the ordinary starts to feel exotic, I think that's exciting. But just staying in this kind of only in the exotic feels to me, I think a lot of us who were trained in glass struggle with from time to time. It's just so alluring. It's just so, and you're like, oh, this pattern, this texture is like, isn't this amazing? It's like, yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it is. Um, but that's a different thing than kind of transforming something that you don't know to be a certain way. You know, like I didn't experience my parents' backyard as exotic until I did that. And then that, like, now I see it different, you know, like, or even just the people themselves, like when you give people space to kind of behave as themselves in front of a camera, really like surprising things can happen from people you know really well. And that's exciting to me. That I feel like that's exciting, and not only is it exciting, but it stands to register for people more broadly.
I love that explanation. Thank you. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about teaching. You know, I don't know that you talked a lot about it, except kind of as like this kind of entryway back into the material, and you talked a little bit about it being in some ways kind of a collaborative practice. And I guess one of the things I'm curious about is like, you know, can a teaching practice and a studio practice be the same, or you know, is there a line between the two of
Yeah,
them, or like what's going on in the classroom in your studio, and where is that line, and how do they kind of influence each other?
yeah. So I chose U Chicago in large part, I mean, it was well funded, relatively speaking, but I felt strongly that the people, at least enough of the teachers there, were like there to teach, and which sounds crazy to have to say that, but yeah, like people that didn't need to be there were there, and they were there too with undergrads that aren't even art majors. They were there, and they were bringing their perspective to their classes. They weren't just taking some syllabus, and they were forming, pedagogy from that grew out of their studio practice and held students accountable for a certain level of engagement. And again, they like, a few in particular don't need to be doing that, but that was really inspiring to me. And I think, for me, teaching doesn't pay nearly enough on its own. So it's like, you might as well be getting something out of it. And that is, yeah, I do think there's a strong potential, at least, for the two to work, to support each other, to feed off each other. Like the assignments I think of are things that I kind of want to do, or conversations that I am already having, that I'm bringing into class, something that I just read that's like, oh, this feels really relevant. Like, let's take this on. And, so the way I do it is a little organic. It's a little, but I really do want to know what they're thinking. And I take their positions really seriously. I'll respond to that. And yeah, but I think like you have to kind of walk the walk if you want someone to take you seriously. And so making stuff in the studio even is like, oh, that, that's related to what we're, if it was totally unrelated, that wouldn't really make any sense. I think about like Jocelyn Prince at RISD too. She would like just be doing her experiments, and that was like, it fed the kind of like, she's in there doing it just like us, and it felt like very generative to have that kind of to everyone kind of be on the level like that. I don't know, what do you think?
I mean, well, personally, I don't know. Personally, I think I kind of vacillate in different ways, but like, obviously, I mean, speaking about glasses, this kind of, it's an exotic material in some way. I mean, it's also kind of
Yeah,
ordinary, but like process wise, it's quite exotic. And the
completely.
spaces are limited. So like, I do think of that, like the space of what we have in the fellowship here, or the space that's kind of in a glass program, as this kind of like coming together, kind of collaborative exploratory space, like in the best cases. And I think like, yeah, classes that become like a laboratory, or like, as you
Yeah,
mentioned, like Jocelyn's like this extension of the studio practice. I think that's like, to me, those are the best. Those are the most kind of memorable, when I feel like I'm part of like producing something while I'm also learning something.
yeah. I mean, yeah, in grad school we worked with William Popel, who does a class called H&G, where you're putting on a play as adults. And that's an extension of his practice, coming from theater and coming from his, like you're in his laboratory, and I don't know, like it's just the stakes become so much higher, but the collaboration that arises inside of that space is like totally invaluable. I don't know. Yeah, those are the kinds of classes and teachers that have stuck with me for sure. Yeah.
I have one more last, one last kind of question, before, if nobody else pipes in, we can kind of hand it back over to Pam and wrap things up. But you know, I think I always ask people about this, that like kind of come from glass and end up kind of moving into other materials and disciplines. And I think of glass kind of pedagogically as this like great teacher of like what it is to like approach mastery, or like what it is to kind of learn about other materials and processes. And the question that I'm always interested in is like, how does the experience working with glass influence the way that you kind of approach other materials and disciplines? Is there something specifically, like I would say there's things that I see that are very like kind of glass, maybe not everybody would think that, but I'd say, oh, like that's, when you stuck that thing on the wall and kind of let it droop over time, or like this
Yeah, for
pitch drop
sure.
experiment thing, like these
Yeah.
seem really native to glass. So can you talk about that a little bit, like the way kind of focusing on one material kind of opens up or like affects the way that you apply, that you approach others?
Yeah. Well, there's definitely always a question of control and the difficulty of controlling glass, I think. I mean, it's a tricky one. Like, I think you can get lost in the mastery, and that is something I try to avoid. I've never been good enough to actually fall too far into that problem, but like, uh, you have to know enough. Like, it's good to know enough to do what you want to do, but I don't know. I guess basically there's so much possibility with glass, and there's just like so much crazy shit it can do, that I think when I approach other materials, I'm just sort of like, what can I make this do that I don't already know? I think that it's that simple. It's just sort of like trying to see something simple. If you have like cardboard, it's like, what could you possibly do with cardboard that would be, something you didn't think you could do with cardboard? I don't know. Yeah, the way in which you have to be in dialogue with it. It's a time-based process too, really. All making is, but hot glass especially is like always move. You can't. It's hard to stop. So it's like once you're in it, and it's very. I think people talk about that as a collaboration too, to some degree. So yeah, I think it's an excellent teaching medium. I think perhaps more than most.
Thank you so much for that, Brett, and thanks for joining us. I'm going to hand it back off
Yeah.
to Pam, and she'll close us out.
Yeah, thank you both so much for being here and sharing your direction, your process, your thought process behind working with some of the mediums and materials. It's wonderful.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Sure thing. In the chat, I did post some links specifically to the Vimeo channel that Brett was talking about. And on the screen now, you see his handle and his website. So you can follow that for more information and to keep up with some of the work that he's doing. I do encourage everybody to register for our next Wheaton conversation. It is with our current Creative Glass Fellowship recipients, Saiv Molds, Eriko Kobayashi, and Indibu Razangani. They will be joining us on Thursday, November 16th, and the registration is up on our website. So please take a trip over there and register for the next one. Feel free to download the chat for those links that I had mentioned, or you can reach out to me through email and I'll provide you with a text. I'd love to hear from those of you who are new to this series. Feel free to contact me with any questions that you have or any suggestions. And I sincerely thank you for being here, and I hope you join us for future programs. Bye, everybody.